Hey everyone, Ramsey here from Jello back with another Web3 marketing video. In this video, we're going to be covering something that is usually a hot topic for projects looking to go through their TG and are obviously looking to launch their token. And that is the infamous KOL round. Now, what we're going to be covering today is plain and simply what exactly is a KOL round and how you should discern whether you should be conducting a round or not. So without further ado, we'll get into the video. So the first thing we need to understand is what exactly is a KOL round. Well, in short, it's pretty much just a strategic investing round where you're opening up allocation for your project to be invested in by influencers and more strategic investors who could ideally support in distributing your product or kind of pushing the narrative and more awareness to your brand. So you kind of open up this allocation, and all the KOLs will pay you an investment to have tokens in your project. And so that means they are more aligned with you, and as they have a vested interest in your company, they are more incentivized to push you over a longer period of time until their tokens unlock. And they at this point should have done enough work to have helped the token price somewhat stabilize higher than it launched, and they can obviously exit their investment happily. That is the premise. Um, Sometimes rounds are not as simple as that, and the terms can get pretty weird. But for the most part, this is a pretty simple concept. It's basically just another investment round that you open up for specifically for influencers. So why would you even want to engage in this is the real question. The main benefits of a KOL round are pretty intuitive. It's similar to what you would get with a traditional influencer agreement, except you have them for a little bit longer as they have a vested interest in the project. So you get all the benefits such as being able to amplify your narrative, drive awareness to the products, just improve distribution and visibility, build some trust with the audience depending on which KOLs you're going to be using, and ultimately you'll be able to tap into a plethora of different kind of audiences as well, depending on your spread of influencers. Now, for some projects, you will obviously be able to save cash because if they're investing in you, then they're giving you money. And sometimes these KOL rounds are actually just people giving allocation without investment, where they're kind of investing with the services. Um, Technically, it's not an investment round, but sometimes these are classed as them as well. But either way, it's a lot more cost effective than a traditional KOL agreement where you pay them in cash, and they obviously provide their services. So for projects that are kind of strapped for cash at the minute or are getting to the end of their runway, it is a viable option. But obviously, from a pitching point of view to these influencers, if you are coming across desperate, they'll know something is up, and it might not be a valid route for you. So make sure to manage those expectations accordingly. Now, the kicker with a KOL round over a traditional agreement is because they have a vested interest, they're more likely to utilize more of their resources to help the project. And this is the same for any investment, right? When you raise pre-seed or seed rounds, or even a Series A, like your investors are not just there providing capital. You should have investors that are willing to go the extra mile. And when you have influencers on board and they have tight knit circles, they might know LPs, they might know other people who can drive volume on the charts. They might have Telegram groups that they might discuss projects in and kind of help put them in the right places. These things are now on the table without having to really ask for them. Well, they should be on the table without having to ask for them because now there is a vested interest from the influencer. So, you do have this amplification of the message and you have the chat, but then you also have more of their personal network and resources at your disposal. So it can be a pretty nifty solution. So the question becomes now, if this is so good, so why wouldn't anyone do this? Or what are the risks associated with running a KOL round? Well, firstly, we have to look at regulation and compliance. Now, this might sound pretty counterintuitive considering most KOLs are like anonymous, but if they are going to be investing in the company on, through a SAFT, which is obviously a legal document, they have to be compliant with the KYC or KYB, um, and obviously the AML checks and stuff like that. So it's really, really important that your influencers are going to be abiding by these regulatory frameworks. If they don't, it could cause trouble for you. So this is one thing that you need to really note. Secondly, we have to make sure that they are aligned with us, right? A lot of people do KOL rounds with anyone who will provide money or take tokens, right? The issue here is that we have to remember that these people who are pushing our narrative, that we're paying to push our narrative, right? They are an extension of our brand, and as such, they should represent our brand as much as we represent our brand. You don't judge a leader by their ability; you judge them by the people they're surrounded by. And I think it's important to know that for a brand, you don't necessarily judge the brand on its own communications, but who is communicating about the product to. What type of people are being attracted and representing this brand? And so alignment is something that we have to be careful of, because if we align with the wrong KOLs and we push the wrong message to the wrong audience, it could hinder us in the midterm, in the short term. In the long term, people might forget unless it's a really, really bad thing. But you hear stories of brands aligning with different KOLs, and it it really does skew the perception of that brand in the space going forward. Thirdly is over promotion, right? This is a huge risk, and I think this is kind of aligned with the with the second point on alignment. When you're dealing with these KOLs and vetting them, we have to make sure that we're not dealing with people who are constantly shilling projects. Because if you have an influencer that is constantly shilling 2, 3, 4, 5 projects per week, their audience knows that they're just shilling anything, and so this brings down their credibility and their rep, and ultimately makes their content less valuable. So we really want to make sure that when we are bringing in influencers to the round or opening up that opportunity, that we are being extremely selective with which voices that we're letting represent us, right? We don't want to fatigue the audience a lot at the early stages. Um, and I think that is obviously the main three issues we have here, things we have to consider. Now, the other thing that we have to consider is looking at the market, right? I'm not saying that market dictates everything, but we have to understand that the moment in crypto market cycle, right? And if you do an investment round now, let's say now we are in the peak bull market where it's hype euphoria, everything is going on, and we do a KOL round. The probability that in 9 months' time, when the tokens are fully unlocked, or even longer, in a year's time when the tokens are unlocked, those KOLs might be facing, we might be facing a bear market, and those KOLs allocations might be down, and they might be potentially even below their investment price, which means that they will not have had a good experience with you and be less likely to support you going forward. And so it's important that when you do these KOL rounds, you either do them at a point where the market is at a lull, so you get a better price, and you get their support through the downtimes to then release during the good times, or you provide a, let's say, friendly vesting, right? So the market conditions are not as effective on, or don't affect the outcome for the KOLs as much, and ultimately don't turn them against you, because if they turn their audience against you, it's not really a good look. Now, this is something that you can't really control. I just think it's something to factor in, right? Um, Whether it's to how you structure the round, how you structure the vesting schedule, it might also dictate which KOLs you go with, because there are some that might push for um, a very short vesting, and that they'll show you that their hand is within the market and not really for the project. So it's really important that when you do your KO round, you have to assess the market conditions, because they might not be the right environment to run around. For example, last year, around March 2024, a lot of rounds were being done, and a lot of people were getting very happy. However, when those rounds unlocked, the tokens were down horrendous. And that's no one's fault. right? So you have to just be careful. There is this market risk, and you can't really control it, but you can try, maneuver it in other ways. Um, but nonetheless, it's important just to have that conscience that this thing is going to affect these deals no matter what. Now, these are the things to think about when looking to decide or allocate tokens to KOLs. The first thing is relationships. As a brand, do we need to rely on an agency to access these KOLs, or can we go about and build those relationships for ourselves? Now, for a long-term partnership, I would always recommend the brand go ahead and have the relationships with the KOLs, because it means there's less friction and probably will be cheaper. However, there are agencies out there that are specialists in building these relationships and allowing brands to have access to them. It's something to consider in the sense that if you have to apply more resources to get the KOLs on board, depending on what the fees are and the structure of the fees for the agency, it might come out pretty expensive. Some agencies run on a commission basis, some are on a retainer basis, and some are a mix. So depending on what you're able to do, um, it will obviously impact the way that you pay out the compensation for these agencies. The second thing we need to consider is regions. All right, KOLs across different regions care about different things and have different cultures that they need to adhere by, and they care about different things ultimately, right? So people in Korea might care about different things than people in America, and so different projects might not be as fruitful in those different regions, or the way that they structure the campaigns might be different, and the way that the content is pushed might be different. It is important that you do think about how you want to structure your allocation. Depending on how big you are and how much budget you have, you might want to narrow down to a specific region to win that region. Or if you have a lot of budget, you can go all over the world and just have that omnipresence approach. But it's important to have that in the back pocket, thinking about what regions are going to make the most impact for your brand. And the third thing is, are you actually in the right place for it, right? Is the timing right? And I don't say this as market timing, I'm saying this about your product and your messaging, right? I'm just going to put in brackets here, not market, with my awful handwriting on my trackpad. So if you made it this far with watching this, you're a real one. Um, so yeah, when it comes to your product and your messaging, like if you're looking to launch a token, um, I'm not here to judge on why you're launching the token. It should just make sense that you have your messaging honed in and your narrative honed in, because if not, then it's going to be wasted budget and it's going to be wasted allocation, because they're going to be pushing an agenda that is not going to be around for the long term. And why that's, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because obviously products change over time. But if you're jumping between narratives and you're paying a large allocation of your tokens to these KOLs to push that narrative, but it's going to change in 2 months, that's not really going to be a good use of your funds, because people might get confused down the line and it might actually cause friction then. So we need to make sure that it's the right time and we have all our ducks in order to go for it and commit to this round. So I think those are the main things. Um, Ultimately, it's a slightly high risk, high reward strategy. Depending on what your product is and what KOLs you bring in, it could be very fruitful. But again, if these things go wrong and you don't have the right guidance on how to select the right KOLs, or structure the campaign appropriately, then it could all be for nothing. And so it's important to have that view and that holistic understanding of what these things can look like and how you can traverse them accordingly. So if you're thinking about a KOL round or how to structure your launch campaign, feel free to drop me a message at Yonko Rambo on Twitter or on Telegram, or even get in the comments and I can try contact you myself. But if you found this video helpful, feel free to drop us a like, comment, and subscribe for the next videos. And if you haven't already, please join our Telegram channel where we drop marketing alpha for crypto companies, to help you go through everything from narrative and brand positioning through to your go-to-market and wider distribution. So this was Ramsey. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.